everyone, thanks for tuning in. I have with me Joshua Fair. He has a bachelor's in nuclear engineering. He has a master's in marriage and family therapy and is a licensed professional counselor. And today, Josh has been wonderful enough to agree to talk to us a little bit about pornography use, some of the stigma and misunderstandings around it, and what we need to know and how we can improve it if it is something impacting our lives. So I'd love to know just in general how you came to this topic and how you came to know so much about it and how you see it being important in the world of therapy.
Okay, yeah. Well, it wasn't my plan as a counselor to go into this topic. When I came here as an intern, when I was getting my master's in marriage and family therapy, the owner of the practice put me in a group for men struggling with pornography issues. And that's kind of how I got into the practice of it. But I myself am a survivor of childhood molestation, and that led to a lot of addictive behaviors, including wrestling with pornography for about 2 decades. So I come from it both clinically and as a survivor of it.
Wow.
So,
what would you say is one of the number one things when people do come in seeking help? Whether it's their misunderstandings around it or what they're looking for in terms of assistance?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is thinking that pornography use dwells mostly just with sex. It's a much more complicated thing than that. It usually has a lot to do with emotion regulation problems. It can be undiagnosed mood disorder like depression or bipolar. It can also be the symptoms of a trauma, but it rarely has anything to do with whether they're satisfied in their marriage or not. A very small percentage of people struggling with pornography report that they're not satisfied with who their spouse is.
So that brings up a really good point. I think a lot of people think that it is a main factor or is coming from the relationship. What would you say to a spouse or a partner who's coming in asking what's wrong or where this started or what they're doing wrong to create this problem?
Yeah, that's a great question because human sexuality strikes at the very core of who we are as adults, who we are as couples, and who we are as just individuals. And many spouses feel like they're not enough, that it's their fault. What's wrong with me? And those are natural reactions to this. They're not crazy for feeling that. And it's hard for them to see that this is something that is deeper than that. The spouse who's using the pornography usually is feeling incredible amounts of shame, wants to stop, doesn't know how to stop, and doesn't know how to be vulnerable about what they're going through because of how we perceive someone who is using pornography. Words like pervert and things like that get thrown out. And so there's all this secrecy, I can't tell my friends, I can't talk to someone about this, no one else is going through it. So it's a condition that really isolates both people, not just the user, but those, their most intimate relationships as well are highly isolated and suffering.
In order to attempt to break that isolation as a loved one or someone trying to support someone struggling with pornography, what are a couple things that they can do, or what are a couple things that they should not do?
Well, one is don't go it alone. Get help, talk to someone. Some people to talk to that I would recommend is get yourself a counselor for yourself to help you deal with your emotions and the sense of shame and betrayal you're going through. And also at the same time, if you got a pastor or there's let's say in this case it's a man who's using, I would recommend to the wife, talk to a friend of his that is emotionally mature that he respects. He may expect anger, expect him to have a shame reaction to that. He's not going to like it. But that is one of the kindest things you can do, is to get someone else involved who's not tied up emotionally in the problem, who cares and isn't going to label him, isn't going to abandon him, because there's huge abandonment issues going on inside of pornography use. And then at the same time, you're also going to want your own counselor, because as he starts to get healthier, it's going to shift the emotional dynamics of the relationship. He's, as he grows, he's going to start talking about what he feels, and you may not be ready for that. Right. It's a whole shifting of the power in the relationship, hopefully towards one of more equality. But you may not be ready for it, and you might need someone to help guide you through how to deal with when he actually expresses when he's frustrated about something, instead of turning to the pornography to deal with his emotions. And so it's going to be difficult.
Would you say, as humans, we love to try and find an easy solution, a quick, easy solution?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Would you say that in the case of pornography, just cutting off access, or just, shutting that door somehow, is that simple enough? Is that going to solve the problem at heart?
No, it's not. And like I said, because, it's oftentimes connected with so many other things: abandonment issues, childhood emotional neglect. It can be connected to a sexual trauma that hasn't been treated. It can be connected to an undiagnosed mental disorder like depression or bipolar disorder. And oftentimes, a person who has addictive behaviors to pornography has addictive behaviors to other things: compulsive spending, overeating, excessive exercise, even just being addicted to an emotion like anger, or seeming to be addicted to anger. So there can be a lot going on than just simply putting up, filters, controlling access, moving the computer to a place, locking down cell phones. Those are useful, and I would recommend them anyways if there's children in the house, especially. But they're not going to solve the problem, because the problem goes deeper than simply a behavior.
You led me right to my next question, which is, a lot of people are later in their journey of life, and there are kids around. And is that your recommendation to how to protect them and make sure they stay safe in this process of healing and treatment?
Well, even not just to protect the kids from someone who is dealing with pornography, but just to protect kids in general. These are some good guidelines: is, know what your kids are doing digitally. Know where they're going. Have access to their Instagram and their Facebook. See what their friends are communicating. One, protect them from cyberbullying. Let them have electronics in their bedrooms. If they don't need a TV up there. That's the place to get dressed and go sleep for children. And I would, video games, fine, let them play video games, but have it in the living room. Know what games they're playing. A lot of these video games, they have ratings, but you can modify these. You can install mods that can be highly sexualized. If they're up in their room, you have no idea what your kids are being exposed to. And that's one of the things that's common with users of pornography, is very early exposure to sexually explicit material at an age when they're not ready. It used to be, you'd find, a neighborhood friend's dad's pornography magazines, or your parents' pornography magazines would be the route of exposure. But nowadays, it's in the pocket. It's in the cell phone. You have no idea what things your children are being exposed to on the school bus and things like that. So you need to educate your children about age-appropriate sexual education. You need to start early talking to them about what's inappropriate touch, and make it safe for your kids to tell you if someone has inappropriately touched them. They need to start talking to them about the emotions of relationships, and not to confuse sex with emotions. It takes a lot of vulnerability on parents. A lot of parents need to grow up emotionally to have these conversations with their kids. a lot of research have come across is fathers play a critically important role in the emotional development of their children. And when fathers are emotionally engaged and talk about the emotions of relationships with their younger children, especially as they go into adolescence, they delay it delays when they have sexual behaviors, delays when they get into romantic relationships. It has, and it helps them actually find more emotionally healthy people to have these relationships with when they see good emotions modeled by their parents. So parents need to educate themselves. Unfortunately, as many people who are exposed to this sexually explicit material young are exposed before formal sex education in the school. So it's a little late.
Yeah.
I was exposed at the age of 10, and I think it was 13 when the school system where I grew up actually had a sex education class. By then, the damage was done.
Right. And so the formal education, the clear-cut education is coming after exposure and confusion.
Yes. And by then, really, it just adds to the shame.
Absolutely. If you were talking directly to somebody who's watching this today that's either experiencing this with somebody in their life or experiencing them themselves, what would be the first step you would tell them to starting the healing or exploring the treatment process to getting through this?
Well, obviously the first step is always admitting that you have a problem, that you're struggling with it, and you're not the only person. The numbers are about 65% of men are looking at pornography about once a month, and about close to 30% of women. And the numbers are rising over the last 3 decades, especially amongst younger women. We don't often think of women and this problem, but it's becoming a bigger problem there for a number of reasons. One, the digital access. The other one is the pornographers are changing the way they make their content to target women specifically, and also changing in sexual norms. So there's a lot of factors involved in there. You can't nail it down to one thing. So, but you're not alone. This is a very common problem. One, it's just easier to get to. Especially nowadays, when I was a kid, it was like, you got exposed by what somebody else owned, but when you became an adult, you had to go buy it. So you had a face-to-face interaction with somebody. That was kind of a little bit of a deterrent.
Right.
But with the internet, no one knows you're online. Most of the content is free, and it's available in your back pocket. And so it's a much more dangerous thing. It's easier to get to nowadays, I would say, than alcohol and tobacco and the harder street drugs.
That's a great point.
So, and it may just be that makes it more prevalent than the other types of addictions we're used to seeing, or talking about. So,
well, thank you. I think that we really learned, I'll say I learned a lot today. You've definitely helped me understand the complexity of the issue and that solutions might not always be as easy or accessible as people want to think they are. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. I would just close out. There is hope. You can overcome this. You just can't do it alone. We all need people in our lives to help us deal with the pain of life.
Is that what we offer? Is that what you offer?
Yes. I listen. We start to figure out your history. What role is this playing in your life? Why is it there? What is it trying to do for you? Are you numbing out of pain, or are you so numb from pain you're using it to try and feel again? All kinds of things going on. Are you reenacting a trauma you've been through? There's so many reasons why we can't just simply say, well, this is it. We have to you need someone who just listens and asks questions, will challenge you, but at the same time support you.
Wow. Well, thank you, Josh. We really appreciate it.